Today, Love and Torah Part 31. All right, so continuing in our journey here, now we're going to be looking a lot more at how do we love our neighbor? Okay, how do we love our neighbor? Because we've been talking for 30 parts already about this idea of love in the context of Scripture, which seems to be very apparent, I think, at this point, inextricably connected to some level of commandment keeping and guarding and behavior that's in the commandments. Because we're told the two great commands are to love our Creator and to love each other. And the how is in the Torah commands. And so we, I think, don't have to continue to make that argument, but now we're trying to get to the other parts of it is not whether or not, I think we all can agree we have to do it this way. If we're going to love Him and love each other, the instruction comes from, but how do we do this now? And we started on that journey a little bit last week, and we're going to continue today. We're going to go to chapter 5 of Ephesians. Okay, Ephesians chapter 5. And we're going to go ahead and begin in verse 1. And I don't know how far we're going to go. We're going to go through most of chapter 5 into chapter 6 and just read some of these things and stop where necessary to expound. All right, so verse 1, become then imitators of Elohim as beloved children. Walk in love as Messiah also has loved us and gave himself for us, a gift and an offering to Elohim for a sweet-smelling fragrance. Well, let's stop right at the verse 1 even. I should have stopped there before even verse 2. But I like the package of that there. Become then. Now, he says become then because he's already been talking about other things in chapter 4, okay, where he says, like at the end of the chapter, verse 31, let all bitterness and wrath and displeasure and uproar and slander be put away from you, and be kind towards one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as Elohim also forgave you in Messiah. How do we do this? He says we become imitators. Okay? But how do you become an imitator? Well, you have to be paying attention to what the other person's doing and then try to mimic or duplicate what they're doing, imitate what they're doing. So you have to be paying attention. You have to be aware. You should listen to teachings like the one called, What Did Yeshua Do? I mean, if we're supposed to imitate him, we should know what he did. So it says, become then imitators of Elohim. So it's not just Yeshua, it's the Father and Son together. How have they treated you? How do they look towards other people? What's their behavior like? He says, I'm an El, compassionate, filled with abundant kindness and mercy. And so we want to look at these things and say, okay, he says that we are to become imitators of Elohim. So some of you may need to elevate your paying attention level. Not paying attention to me or to you or the next person next to you, although there will be aspects of that we'll touch on here in a little bit. But first and primarily, paying attention to how he has handled you, how he handles other people. All of the stuff you read in your scriptures, how has he dealt with and handled everything? And we're supposed to be imitators of that. Now, when I say imitators, not in the full literal sense in every single aspect, because some things are above your pay grade and not your job. But in the areas that are you, in other words, the areas where you are supposed to be doing or not doing and how you're supposed to interact with each other, he wants you to do it as he does it. Okay? And so this is the kind of thing, like Yeshua gives us insight when he says, well, you need to not just forgive 7 times, but 70 times 7. Wonder where he got that from. Maybe that's their approach when they look at us. In other words, you just keep forgiving. Okay? And so you get that insight. So you're going to get insight 2 ways. One is through observing. The other is, now this is different with them than with us. Let me explain where I'm going with this. With us, we talk and we don't always do. In other words, we talk the talk, we don't always walk the talk. With them, they walk the talk. So we can get the same insight to imitate from what they say as well. We didn't have to see it, but we can learn from what they've said, because if they said it, they do it. So be clear, this is not always the case with us. We are not congruent with our words all the time. We try probably, and we really should try all the time to be in line with our talk, but that's not always the case. So some of you may think, yeah, but I have trouble observing. I don't know what I'm paying attention. Well, listen to what he says. When he describes himself, the way he handles everybody else he's interacted with in Scripture, you can trust that that's consistent with who he is all the time. And so that's another way that we can learn to imitate Elohim. And we're doing this as beloved children. As beloved children. And so, to be called children of living Elohim, the one thing we need to do is covenant. Because it's the covenantal relationship that makes us his children. Now, I know by default, physically, literally, all of us were created by him, so that makes us his children. But he's referring to a relationship that's by choice, not by default. All of you have families by default. You have parents, you have siblings, whatever it is. Okay, maybe you don't have siblings, maybe you're only child, but your whole situation is by default. But by choice, you have a heavenly father, you've got an older brother, and you got all these siblings. But that's by choice, and we could be, in his eyes, beloved children. So he's telling you that a beloved child imitates the parent. Now, this was not the case in human beings in terms of getting good fruit. If you imitate him, you're going to get perfect fruit because he's perfect. When we imitated our parents, we ended up with the generational curses of bad behavior and mimicking. So he's trying to say, look, you already imitate each other. You already imitate all the wrong people. You need to now imitate him. Okay? Imitate him and you'll get the results that he keeps telling you you'll get. All right. And he says, and walk in love, as Messiah also loved us. He says, walk in love. And again, the definition here is the one we've laid out for the last 30 parts. Okay, so what does love look like? Well, we've been talking about that for weeks. The commandments teach us what love looks like, how we treat each other. Love is not stealing from each other. It's not committing adultery. It's not false witnessing. It's not making idols. It's not having unequal weights. It's not, not paying fair wage for honest, or maybe not giving an honest day's work for the wage. Okay? Love, he tells it in every one of the commands, no matter how mundane. Love is putting a fence on the roof of your house. Well, when people used to sleep on the roof of your house, because that's what they did back in those days. Okay, so there's lots of things about love all throughout all the commandments. So he says, and walk in love as Messiah also loved us. Now, he's saying walk in love, and now he's adding as Messiah also loved us. So now we have a higher level of this, which is he gave himself for us. So there was a selfless, self-sacrificing aspect on top of this mechanical stuff. All right? So on a mechanical level, you treat each other in a certain way with equity and fairness and with the rules that tells you how to treat people properly. But on top of that, there's a giving of yourself. No greater love has someone but except to do what? Lay down their life for their brother. It's that love that says if your brother, wants your jacket, give it to him, give him your shirt also, whatever. Be about giving and self-sacrificing and not only worry about me. Because Yeshua, knowing full well that you deserve nothing, and really, we all deserve nothing, gave himself so that we could have something. And so he says, we are to walk in love as Messiah has also loved us. And we're talking about walking. What's that mean? Just only when we're talking to him and interacting with him, or all of us? We spend most of our time with all of us, at least in a more conscious awareness. We're always with them, but we're not always thinking about them like we should. But we're always being aware of the human beings that are around us. He says, so walk in love as Messiah also loved us and gave himself for us, a gift and an offering to Elohim. So he did that because that's a gift to Elohim. When you put yourself second, when you put others first, he says esteem others above yourself. When you can do that, that's, some people think, well, what can I give to Elohim? Well, it says here that's called a gift. You want to give Elohim a gift? Well, go ahead and give yourself for others. It's a gift to the other person too, by the way. When you put yourself second and esteem somebody else and sacrifice of your desires and your pleasures and your whatever so that someone else can have something. When you inconvenience yourself for somebody else. All right? This is a gift to both the person you're doing it for, and it's a gift to Elohim. It's a sweet-smelling fragrance to Elohim. Look, a lot of you may have this challenge from time to time, okay? I'm not saying a lot of you have this problem all the time, but if you're in a wrong moment, in a wrong attitude, and distracted by me, which could be things you have to get done, things on your list that are happening, all of these responsibilities, having an overflowing plate of things to do, somebody then comes to you with a need and asks you for some help, and you look at them like, oh, don't you know I'm busy and I got all this stuff to do, but you're helping them anyway while you're whining and griping. This isn't sweet smelling to anybody. This smells bad. Okay? All right? If you're going to do it as Messiah would do it. James says to count the trials joy. Well, you know what? It's a trial when somebody needs you and you want to help them, but it's completely inconvenient to what you had your head wrapped around. All of you have probably experienced this. You've been in a restaurant with a waiter or a waitress that really had no interest in being there and didn't want to serve you, and if you asked them for anything beyond just the normal, hey, this is my drink order and this is my meal, and you wanted a little extra something else, they would roll their eyes at you like, oh, you know. And I've actually said to some waiters and waitresses, I'm sorry. And they look at me like, they want to thank me for apologizing. I'm sorry for asking you to do your job. My fault. But as a human being who's covenanted, it's actually your job to put others first. It's actually your job to give that gift as the Messiah gave it to us. There was nothing convenient about him having to leave heaven, put on a flesh suit, live with us, and then get tortured and murdered so that we could have life. There was nothing convenient about that. I mean, that's love on the highest level. And some of you say, oh, but you don't understand, this person or that person is so hard to love. And you're so easy? The Messiah has to love you. The Father has to love you. You're challenging. Just ask some of the people close to you. They'll tell you if they're going to be honest. Although some of you, they can't be honest with you because you'll have a little, meltdown because they actually shared something honest with you. And Yah forbid you should know that you were imperfect. Now, you already know it, but you just don't want anybody to actually mention it. It's okay if you know it, but don't point it out. So we're all tough when it comes to being lovable by at least everybody. And so I say, oh no, all these people love me. Do they? You think they do. Some of them are just being nice to your face because they're very polite. Look, I don't want to create a civil war between the North and the South here, but all right, when I first came to the South, I noticed something very different than the North, okay? Not going to hold one higher than the other. Okay, I was used to in the big cities up north, people were very hard and cold to get to know first, abrupt and in your face, but once you got past that, you also had to realize you were getting truth most of the time. How they felt was how they felt. Came south, and I never knew what anybody felt because everybody was always smiling to my face and stabbing me when they were behind my back. Because they were trying to be polite and not create a scene. I'm not trying to pick on them. I'm just saying they were trying, and I understand that. But there's not the level of honesty there. But on the other side of it, the honesty up north was hard to deal with too because it was, and you're like, can we just tone that down a little bit? I didn't need that coming at that speed in that way. But at least you knew how somebody felt. Okay? And we have to find a way to take the genteelness of the South and be more polite, but also take more of the honesty in dealing with people from the north and find a way to balance those two, okay? Because they both have their positives and their negatives. Hey, it's great to know where you stand with somebody, but boy, that didn't feel real good when I had to hear it. All right, that's the way it was up north. And then coming down south, hey, it feels nice to be talked all nice and everything, but then I really didn't know until I found out later that daggers were always flying when I wasn't around, and they were talking to other people because they wouldn't come to me and tell me to my face. Okay? And that's not, neither one of those is better than the other, neither one is worse than the other. Because I understood how people would come and deal with me or deal with people up north. See, when you grow up in it, you understand it, whichever one you grow up in. If you grew up in Europe, very different than here. Different parts of Europe, very different than here. Okay? My wife's family is Eastern European. Very different than an American way of seeing things and thinking. Not right or wrong or better or worse. Challenging in different ways. All right? Northerners are a challenge, especially if you're a Southerner. Anybody you're not used to is a challenge. Okay? What you're used to, you're used to. And he's saying, look, we've got to get to the place where we can esteem others above ourselves. So we have to find a way to communicate openly and honestly, but also we have to receive it appropriately and do it with enough love and caring and compassion that hopefully it comes across correctly. Because one of the challenges, as more than anything else, that we're dealing with within the body as far as loving each other is that we have a real hard time talking to each other openly and honestly. For two reasons. One is that we know the other person is likely to not respond very well. They're going to get, what? Defensive. And then if they get defensive, that's almost immediately followed by getting on the offense. They're going to attack in some way. All right? But yet, you need to communicate. I have people come to me all the time saying, I'm having a problem with this sister or this brother, and there's this other person in the body, or maybe it's just a family member, and I'm like, well, did you talk to them? I can't talk to them because blah, blah, and it all blows up. And then if I talk to the other one, they think, oh no, our relationship with that person's wonderful. Yes, because they're not telling you how they really feel about whatever it is that's causing a real problem in your relationship. This goes back to what we talked about many times, the paradigm shift that we have to go through to grow up. I talked about that at Rosh Chodesh. I talked about that last week. We are not growing up to the point where we're mature enough to hear things that are not easy to hear. How else are you going to grow up if you can't hear the things that are not easy to hear? We don't like to be told no. We don't like to be told the thing that we're all excited about and we're all wanting to go do is not going to happen, or is not what whoever is authority over you says no. I mean, this happens with husbands with their wives, parents with their children, employees with their bosses, because it requires something that if we're going to have this relationship that's on this level, right, with each other, not just a vertical relationship, although it applies in both cases, we have to learn to have that ability to receive criticism or feedback and not have to control, well, I didn't like the way it was delivered. Well, that's because they're still growing too. But it was delivered and you needed to hear it. Yeah, but I didn't like the way you said it. Okay, I can work on that possibly, but don't let that block the fact that you needed to hear it. Okay? From whoever this is, not just from me to you. This could be a husband to a wife to a husband, parents to children, whoever. You're so hung up on the delivery that you're not hearing the message. And then you get all defensive. Oh, and instead of getting real defensive and defending yourself, you turn on the attack and say, oh yeah, well what about you? You do this. Hold on. That all may be true, but this is not helping our relationships. Let's deal with the first thing that actually is there first. And then you might say, I appreciate that. I'm glad we worked on me on that. Which, by the way, while we were talking about it, reminded me that there's something also that I've been meaning to tell you, and you can kind of walk through that. And all you're sitting there going, oh, that's not ever going to work in my marriage. Having a conversation like that. Why not? Why not allow, if one of you is talking to the other one, to let it be about whatever they brought up. Do not turn it about them. Do not reverse it. Do not, just deal with that. And then, if all that other stuff triggered, when that's finished, you can say, by the way, while that was going on, maybe it was just my defense mechanisms, but this came up in my mind. I haven't really shared this with you like I should. I want to talk about it. But it's separate afterwards. So it's not a counterattack. It's not defensiveness. Allow the criticism, allow you to sit there and go, I wonder if that's true. I wonder if that really is a problem, instead of thinking, oh, who are you to tell me? You're such a mess, and you're going to talk to me? Well, if your spouse can't talk to you, who is ever going to get to talk to you? You have to get there somehow. It's like the children with the parents. If you're not going to listen to the parents, well, then who are you ever going to listen to if they can't talk to you? Now, of course, you have to make the effort to know that when you're going to the person, you should be trying to do it in a way that is kind and gentle and fruit of the Spirit. You're not just going over there saying, what the blah, blah, blah is wrong with you, blah, 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 blah. That's not going to work. To say, hey, this came up, I wanted to share it with you, it's causing me a challenge, or it's something I need you to do differently, or whatever, and you have to try to first recognize if the person is trying to at least come across gently. And they should try to do that. But then you have to monitor your immediate defense mechanisms, and you start bowing up, and you start ready to go on the attack. Oh, you think that's a problem? What about when you do this? Okay, let's talk about that after we deal with this one. Okay, this is not a let's start throwing and shooting at each other and see who's going to win the fight. This is not a war. It was a conversation about something that somebody was irritated by or thought should be done differently. Okay? All right. So you have a conversation. I'd rather you not put your shoes here. I'd rather you not leave the toothpaste cap off. I'd rather you not, whatever it is. Okay? And it could be, I'd rather you not talk to me in a certain way. But we tend to react instantaneously with defensiveness. Now, when we talk about being imitators of Elohim, guess what you never get to do with Elohim? Elohim corrects you, and you get to say nothing. We should learn from that. Now, you can yell and scream all you want. Not going anywhere. He's just going to sit patiently until you're done throwing your tantrum and say, okay, you ready to listen now? And so, if we're going to become imitators and walk in love, this whole idea of giving of yourself, okay, so then you may ask yourself, before I go to the other person, am I going because it's about me? Am I going because I'm offended? I'm hurt? Someone stepped on my, we're back to the feelings bag stuff. Haven't talked about that in a long time. Are you being very rude and quite disgusting, letting your feelings lay all over the place where people can step on them? Because then now you're approaching somebody from a wrong place. If your emotions are getting stirred and they're negative emotions, that is not the time to do it. You need to calm down. Then you can come and approach things in a different way. See, remember, I talked about this in developing the character of Yeshua. A selfless person, which is what we're supposed to become, right? Because the problem that we have is self. Not who you are, it's that selfness. Because some of you will get real offended if I called you selfish, because you're very generous people. But see, when I'm not using the term that way, which, by the way, is part of why we communicate so poorly. Somebody can use a term, they're meaning it one way, you're taking it another way, and boom. But if it's all about you, and that's what the focus is on, and I'm hurt, and I'm upset, and now I'm being selfish. I'm being focused on self. Doesn't matter that I give things to people and I'm generous in all kinds of ways. If I let this become about me, now we have a problem. Now, if something's going on and it's about safety, efficiency, effectiveness, something that's for the benefit of the family, not because I personally, didn't like it or it upset me or offended me, that's a different approach. Okay, I get married. One of the first things I said to my wife, she kept asking me when we first got married, well, can I get rid of this? Can I do this? As she moved into my place and we started rearranging it. And I said to her at some point, this is the selfless thing. Okay, I'm not saying I'm selfless all the time, but this was a selfless thing. I said, you can throw out anything but me. Okay? And she's nodding, she remembers. I mean, I literally, because part of it was I got tired of the questions because I wanted her to do whatever she wanted. No, I mean, because she kept asking, and I appreciated the respect that she was asking. So I thought, let me make this simpler. I married you, this is our house, but I want it to be what you want it to look like. So you can do whatever you want to make this your home and throw out anything except me and apparently my denim jacket. Okay, so there was two things. Didn't realize it was a second thing until she found it and said, this thing is like 30 years old. I said, yes, don't throw it out. Don't throw out a man's denim jacket that has all his life's memories in it, okay? Or leather jacket or whatever it is, baseball cap. You know, there are things that it doesn't matter how bad it looks, you just don't throw it away. Okay? So she did the next alternative and bought me a new one. And then expected me to wear that most of the time, which I did as long as we didn't throw out the other one. All right? But see, I could have decided that my house that she moved into needed to be my way. But like Yeshua, I wanted to give of myself. I said, this is now, I want to bless you. I brought you in here. I want this to be as comfortable for you as you do whatever you want here. Okay? All right? Now, my only caveat was going to be if there was going to be something spent that was too much and we didn't have the budget for it or some other thing. But otherwise, make this your place. All right? And so, you know, that's the selfless thing. This is give you like an example. But see, we have too much preferences and the way we want it to be, and that those wants turned into needs because we have a wants-needs disconnect, and you've heard me talk about that a lot, but maybe not lately, where anything we want, we think we need. I need things to be this way and that way and on time and this way. Dinner has to be on the table at this, whatever it is. Some people could care less. Some people have to. It's a very strict idea of how things have to be. All right? And then they fight over it because their expectations and their wants and needs don't match. And this happens in every relationship. See, but our relationship by default, this is why I started with the vertical relationship. Our relationship loving Him, what's the nature of that relationship? We submit ourselves completely to that authority. Whatever He says goes. Although He does give us a lot of free reign to do a lot of things on our own. I mean, He does give us a list of things. He says, this I don't want you doing and this I want you to do. Some of these things I'm going to tell you exactly how I want you to do it. Other things, just make sure you do it. You do it whatever way you want to do it. There's different things that He says different ways. And so He gives us lots of flexibility to be creative and individualistic and do how we want to do. But then when you get into relationships, now you have two people or more that have preferences, especially when you bring children in, right? Guess what? They have their own opinions on how things should be, how they should handle their own space, their room, or what they feel about their clothing and whatever, right? And so how do we then take those relationships? Then you come into a congregation and you interact with people, and you might look at somebody going, can you believe the way they're dressed? Can you believe what they're talking about on Shabbat? Can you believe I caught them playing a game on their phone today during Sabbath services? Can you believe whatever it is? Can you believe? No. Everybody's got their own thing. And so you need to be able to allow them that space. Now, if you think something's a problem, you've got multiple options and choices. You're in a structure. First, look at the person you're looking at. Does that person have a structure already in place? If it's a wife, you can go talk to her directly, especially if you're a woman. If you're a man, you can't go talk to the wife of somebody else's wife. But you may want to have a conversation with the man. Okay? But you have to figure out, how can I do it this way? I know we're talking about this whole thing, but it's walking in love as Messiah also loved and giving of yourself. You have to be careful. Am I approaching it because that offended me and it bothers me and I think they're wrong and I've judged them now? See, now you're not imitating him. Now we're not doing this right. We are not going to get what we need to get until we can get this piece done. How are you going to love your neighbor when you really don't have a way of getting yourself out of the way to actually care that much about somebody else? Because if what I do bothers you so much, you're caring way more about yourself than me. And that's a real hard mindset and heart to deal with. If what the other person does bothers you on a high level, you're caring way more about you than them. Okay? When I say bothers you, meaning it's upsetting to you, not bothers you like, I'm really afraid they're going to hurt themselves, or no, that's a different piece to start. I'm saying, but bothers you like, that's wrong, they shouldn't do that. And next thing you know, you're talking to your friends about it, and you're making posts about it, and you're trying to catch them sideways and indirectly about it, because you're irritated. Because somehow it stepped on your feelings, which should be absolutely kept in a very nice, safe container where nobody can step on them. You need them. We have to have feelings and emotions. Love is one of these emotions that we're talking about here. Love has lots of emotion, but you can't put them out there to be stepped on. All right? And unfortunately, we have a hard time understanding that just because something comes into your awareness sphere of him, whatever, that's like, I heard something over there, or I saw something over there, doesn't mean it involves me. Everything that happens does not involve you. Some of it does. Some of you spend much more time focused on the things that don't involve you than the things you're actually supposed to do that do involve you. Because you're so busy with the things that don't involve you. But we have, again, a hard time loving each other, loving our neighbor, because we have boundary issues, and we don't know what should and shouldn't involve us. And if it does involve us, what that should look like. In what way does it involve us? Well, we got to become imitators of Elohim. Elohim allows lots of natural consequences to take place. All you blues have a hard time with that. Anything that can go wrong should be prevented. Motto of the blue. The opposite of Murphy's Law, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. The blue says, and if we knew it could go wrong, it should have been prevented. Nothing should ever go wrong. All the blues are applauding. Okay? If you're watching this and going, what is blue? What is he? We did a personality test that had to do with colors, okay? Walking in a parking lot at night, daughter's 8 feet behind me. I'm facing this way, she's behind me. Trips in the parking lot, falls down. Blue wife says, why didn't you catch her? I said, catch her? I didn't even see her. But it should have been prevented. By the time I turned around, she's already on the floor. But I got scolded for that. Anyway, but those are one of those moments, okay? And some of you can relate to that, okay? Look, it's great that we want to be aware enough that we should prevent most things we can prevent. But some things, no matter what we do, still go sideways. And if they go sideways, we learn from it so that hopefully we do a better job next time. But it's really hard because a person with that personality is going to keep thinking and getting upset about why it wasn't prevented. What didn't we do? And scold each other and get mad at each other. Well, you should have done this and you should have been looking and you should have had whatever. And I'm thinking, but it happened, okay? So next time, we'll pay better attention. I mean, who expected there to be a giant pothole where it was in the parking lot? Okay? Okay? These things happen. But I'm giving you like a thing that was small, and we laughed about it and everything else. We still have it. But there are things like this that husbands and wives get almost divorced over because they start fighting. Why did you let that? Why couldn't you? Sometimes things happen. We get distracted. We make mistakes. It is what it is. All right? Because some of you guys, especially the blues, you'll be cooking something, get distracted, go do some other task because you're doing 57 tasks. You'll come back and you burnt the food. Well, that should have been prevented. But why did it happen? Because you went and did 16 other tasks instead of staying over there and doing the one. And then you get all angry, and the red husband goes, why do you walk away? What are you getting all upset for? Okay? But this is the kind of things that we do. But then when we're in relationships, what's the word that really describes the problem in the relationships? There's an intolerance. Okay? Because you see the world very clearly your way, they see it very clearly their way, or whatever it is, and we're not tolerant of that's where they were at that moment, and they thought of something else, because we all get distracted, and something gets neglected and either breaks or burns or whatever it is that, you needed to be paying attention. Or somehow it doesn't get finished, all right? Anybody start a laundry, planning to finish it, and then 2 days later you see it still in the washing machine and you forgot all about it? And then instead of owning that, you yell at everybody else in the house who walked past it, how come you didn't change my laundry? Because none of us knew what you wanted to do with that. Okay? See, we have an intolerance. Okay, imitate Elohim. So some of you are thinking, oh, he's just doing that life coaching thing, he's not doing scripture. No, it says imitate Elohim. Who's the most tolerant being in the universe? Elohim. We are very intolerant, very judging, very intolerant, hypersensitive, easily offended, all things he's not. And so these are things that you want to get real. This is getting real, okay? The body, to do what it needs to do, is going to have to find a way to develop these skill sets and to overcome the negative behavior patterns that we've had all these years. The tendencies that we've had in our relationships to go in those wrong directions and to respond in those negative ways. Okay, I've said this many times, and all of you listen. This is not a law or a dictate from me, but it might as well be. Do not touch anything with buttons that types when you're in a negative emotional place. Don't use voice to text when you're in a negative emotional place. Don't communicate when you're angry and upset. Because that gets you in so much trouble, and you can't undo that so easily. It's there. And you'll say to the person who did it to you, but I have your text. Well, I was upset, I'm sorry. Well, if you're upset, don't type. Don't text. Don't call anybody. Calm down before you do anything. Okay? Now, if you're like me, I don't text. I don't do those things, but I might walk right up to you and get in your face when I'm angry. I might call you, say, I have to learn the same thing. It doesn't play out the same as the blues. Blues like to type and do all these other things. I want to get right in your face, okay, and say, stop that. Whatever you just did, I don't like it, fix it, whatever it is. But you can't communicate from that space, all right? You can't. Don't do that. Ladies, if you have a husband, you may want to ask before you do things like that, can you read this first? Is it okay? Is it coming across the right way? Have somebody, it's kind of like vows. You'd like to have them annulled. Well, once you put that on Facebook, it's hard for the husband to annul it. How about show the post in before you put it out? I actually got in a pretty good debate with a husband because of something his wife did and put it on Facebook and put it in those other things. And I said to him, well, because he was starting to say, well, I didn't approve of all that. I said, well, then you need to talk to her and ask her why she didn't ask you first. And ladies thinking, well, I don't need my husband's permission for stuff. No, he's there to protect you from doing something foolish. Because ladies tend, not always, but tend to have more of an emotional response to them want to communicate, especially with the ease. See, ladies, you guys, one of the best things and worst things that happen to you is the ability to communicate without actually having to face anybody. Because you'd never do this face to face. But when you can just send a text or send a Facebook message or something, all of a sudden it feels different and you have the courage to just blast away. But back in the day, you wouldn't have gone up to that person and got in their face. Not saying everybody, there are ones that would. And for the guys, the same thing. All you guys that didn't have the courage to go up to people, oh, you're real bold with your typing and getting things in there, or finding really cute sideways posts that the person you're hoping will know that you're talking about them, even if you're not. Some of you think, well, Rabbi, you do that with your teachings. Yes, I do. But they're not when I'm angry. It's when I'm trying to get a message across, and that's why I say, if you think I'm talking about you, I probably am, and 15 or 30 or at least other people. And I need to realize it's not, if it's just you and me, or it's not just you and me, maybe you're having a problem about something and I want to help you with that, we're helping. But when I start to see that it's rampantly everywhere, then I may want to address it from the mic. Does it always get delivered the way I would like it to? No. Does it come across maybe to whatever? And by whatever, I mean, you could say harsh, this, and sense, whatever word you want to put in a negative way. Sure, it does sometimes. Is it received by the other people well? Mixed. Mixed. Okay? I mean, think about what happened like on Rosh Chodesh. That hit some people in a way, got real mad at me. Other people, it totally made everything different, and I got all kinds of great responses from them. And none of them knew for sure if I was talking about them or not. Some of them were people I hadn't even thought of in a long time. They popped out of nowhere and said, by the way, I heard what you said and I want to apologize for this. I mean, you don't know how people are going to respond. And it can be all kinds of different ways. But you have to make sure that you're not coming from that negative emotional place. I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm offended, I'm hurt, whatever it is. Because that's not going to come across well. Look, ultimately, I know this is hard for you because I know it's hard for all of us. We say it, but we don't actually think of it in terms of the reality. But hopefully, we're all going to live together forever. And I know a lot of you are still hoping certain people won't be there. All right? Thank you, Rocky. Okay. But we all have that problem. On an intellectual, scriptural level, we know that we're all trying to be in the place that's called the kingdom, which means that all of us will be living forever in the same place. Yet, we still have a bunch of people we're not real comfortable with and don't want to talk to and don't even want to be in the same space with. Because we just haven't learned to deal with our emotional challenges. And that's hard because the whole point of all this is to get to a place where we're all becoming Yeshua-like and that we get to that level of Yeshua-likeness where he's going to give us the incorruptible and we can live forever. And you're thinking, well, that person's got a long way to go. Are you looking in the mirror? Don't say those words unless you're looking in the mirror. Who are you to say that person has a long way to go, whoever that person is? Because now you're judging somebody. And don't do that negative stuff. You've done enough things that if Abba look at you with his head down going, what in the world are you doing? Are you out of your mind? He's looking at you going, I've shown you things. I've done miracles for you. I've done all this stuff. And you're doing this? But he's patient. He knows how weak we are. And he sits back and waits for you to figure it out and repent and own it and fix it and move on. And try to dust yourself off and go again. But do we do that with the people we know? But, there's no but. If you can change, they can change. But I don't trust it. We got to do a teaching that's going to, maybe at some part of this or the next part where we have to talk about our biggest challenge, other than what we've already talked about, getting offended, angry, and everything else, is that it creates this next problem, which is our biggest challenge, which is breach of trust. I don't trust them. How can you have a relationship with someone you don't trust? Well, but they breached my trust. Now, sometimes I ask people what that looked like, and sometimes it's legitimate on every level. Sometimes I go, what? That was a breach of trust? But it was still very real to that person. Even though to me it might have been a really small thing. So I can't judge that because that's my perception of it. But if you're married, and before getting married had either other marriages or long-term relationships that had all this baggage that came along with it, you might have a trust issue for your spouse. Okay? If you are in this and you've had other ministry relationships, you may have a trust issue with me or anybody in leadership in ministry because of those previous badly, that's not the word, previous experience that didn't go well. There was some sort of negative impact on you, at least in your perception, either done to or something that should have been done that didn't get done. So sometimes it's neglect and not even caring to pay any attention to you is just as bad as somebody getting overly involved and doing something to you. But you may have trust issues. Looking to a man leader when your father was a big problem, you may have issues there. Trusting Elohim even, who we call Father, if you had all kinds of negative things, or maybe you didn't even have a father. So your negative things are there, but you didn't even have one there to do anything negative. It's hard to connect those things. Maybe your brother was the problem, and we're supposed to look at Yeshua as our loving older brother. How do we relate when we have all these trust issues and all of this baggage? Well, we have to unburden. Yeshua tells us, come to me and unburden. You have to unburden. But you also have to know that the other person is burdened. You know, I wish, I don't know if I want to say it this way, I almost wish, I'll say it that way, all right? I almost wish that all of these things were actually diagnoses, okay? Because you know what? When you see somebody as wonderful as Rylan, you can see his physical handicap. You know his challenge. And so you have a certain level of compassion because it's an obvious challenge. Okay? But when you see someone who looks fairly together, you don't understand that their handicap's not visible. Okay? And all of their experiences have handicapped them so that they are not capable of having a healthy relationship without help with their handicap. This is really important that you're getting this, okay? You need to hear this, all right? If you're married, your spouse is handicapped, and you're sitting there going, I always knew that. Well, so did they about you. You know, this really came clear to me when I was counseling a situation with a married couple. They weren't even part of the ministry, because I don't know how they found me. One of them, I guess, was sort of connected, and they had already separated. And the husband was wanting to get back together. He didn't know what to do. And in talking to them, and he agreed to counsel with me, even though I was not his rabbi. He really wasn't part of the ministry. But he was willing to do whatever. And I would talk to her, and she says, well, I don't know why he can't do this, and I don't know why he can't tell me he loves. Well, I don't know why he can't. So then I talked to him. I said, well, why don't you do those things? You know what it turned out? He can't. It's a handicap. He doesn't think to do it. It never occurs to him to do it. It's not because he doesn't feel it, whatever it was, but it's a handicap in him. And then I went back to her and I said, the next time she said that, I said, well, what if that's actually, your words are actually true? She goes, what do you mean? You said, well, I don't understand why he can't. No, because you're in mind, you're thinking it's a won't. What if it's a can't? She's like, oh, I never thought of it that way. You know, they restored? Because she started dealing with him as a handicapped man who can't do those things naturally without the help and effort of counseling and changing some things, because it's a handicap. All right? When we did the colors, you need to understand that every color had strengths, but also negative attributes that can handicap you. Okay? Okay, so, and if you're missing a color, you have a handicap on every level. You don't have the good or bad. All right? And I was missing 2 of them. So if you're dealing with me, you are dealing with a very handicapped person. Don't laugh. This is true. And you have all these expectations. Well, blah, blah, blah. Listen, I'm so out of balance on the personality chart. You have to know that that's going to handicap me. I'm 87% one and only 13% of the other and zero of everything else. If that was you, you would expect to be handicapped out of balance. Handicap simply means that you have a balance problem in some area. You are challenged in doing something. And so, they look at people with super high IQs, and they're handicapped in a lot of areas of their life, but they're great at that one area. Okay? Musicians, you see musicians, they can play music and do all these other things, and then they end up blowing their heads off because they were handicapped in other areas. They could not deal with life, but they could play music. Anything that's high-end, extreme, or above average means something else is less. Okay? All right, I'm going to use an example that some of you are going to like, some of you are going to hate. All right? But I remember when I was a child and we played these role-playing games. And they could be like superhero games or Dungeons and Dragons, whatever it was. And I'd never be like, the rabbi played all that. I was a kid like everybody else. And now I'm the rabbi. So knock it off. But in one of the games we played, it was a superhero one. So it wasn't all of that stuff, but it was like where you can design your own hero, what powers he had. He could fly, he could do this, he could be bulletproof, whatever it was. But with that, there had to be a balance. So you were given so many points to put in different things, which means that if you put them here, that means that you had a deficit somewhere else, a weakness. And if you wanted to go even higher above the normal amount, you could, but then a negative had to be added to your situation. Okay? So like maybe you had a normal person that was now going to be constantly under attack by the bad guys because you took this extra thing to be more powerful here, but now you have to have this balancing weakness. So in other words, no matter how great you would be at something, there was always a balance. And I learned that from this stupid game. That there's trade-offs. If you're going to have a lot here, that means there's less there. That's actually a reality to life. Thing is, you didn't get to put the points in the different places. You were born with what you have. But now you can learn to work as best you can with what you were given to start with and make the most out of where you started. But you didn't have a choice in how you started. So a lot of people say, well, I like the way he teaches, but I don't like the way he talks to me. Well, that's because I'm handicapped. Okay? Now that, by the way, don't ever use your handicap as a justification or an excuse. But you still need to know you're dealing with a handicapped person. I need to know that so that I can try to overcome the handicap. All right? Person's born without one hand, they learn how to do things in a different way with the other hand. I've seen people without hands do things with their toes. I couldn't believe I couldn't even do it with my hands. You figure out a way to work around your handicap. Okay? All right? But you have to start thinking about the other person. Every person you're working with is handicapped. They're just not diagnosed necessarily. And if they are, they're not telling you. How are we going to have these relationships the way we need to have them if we're not going to at least accept and love the other person as just as screwed up and broken as you are? Imitate Elohim. Elohim knows how bad and screwed up and messed up we all are, and he loves us all anyway. He started you where you were, knowing that you could get there because you're going to take the time to strengthen the weak parts, get rid of the negative parts as best you can as you transform. Transforming is something we really don't want to talk about. We don't really think about. We just think, oh, we're supposed to become like Yeshua. We're supposed to become like Messiah. Well, what does that mean? That means that you have to make real changes. The parts of you that don't match him have got to change to match him. When you got married, we got a lot of married people in here, you've got to make changes to adjust to the other person, and they've got to make changes to adjust to you. You don't naturally come together agreeing on everything and seeing the world the same. Now, hopefully you see most things the same, and that's why you got married, and that's why you get along most of the time. all right? But the reason we end up in big, horrible fights with our spouses is because of the handicaps. One person's handicap smack dab stepped on the other person's handicap, and it set off an explosion, usually over something ridiculous. But that's because we're broken and we're handicapped, okay? And so I want you to start looking at people, not trying to figure out their handicap, but just understand you're dealing with people just like you that have weak areas, all right? And it's easy to figure out the one in the wheelchair, okay? Or the one who can't see, or the one who can't hear, or there's some sort of physical deformity, because you can see it. Well, boy, that person sure yells a lot, well, because they're handicapped. Oh, that person's so quiet, I never see it because they have a handicap. Well, that person, because they have a handicap. It's a weak area that's hurting their ability to function in the balance, okay? Let's say there's supposed to be a place in the middle between overly loud and whatever and overly quiet and completely like antisocial. Well, each one's a hand. You got to move towards whatever, the middle. See, a lot of you don't understand. I have no blue. It's not easy for me to go to social things, sit at your house, hang out with everybody, and want to do the blue. That's a social relational thing. I have to work at it. It's not comfortable. Anything that you have a weaker area in is hard for you to do. Okay? And anything that you have a handicap that's actually more something you do, it's hard to not do. Okay? I tend to get loud. Not that you couldn't tell. Of course, my wife enjoyed it for 3 weeks when I couldn't get loud, because I couldn't breathe, let alone get loud. I was like whispering. Then all of a sudden, she's like, okay, you're healthy now. I liked it better the other way. Because I've gotten loud a couple of times in the last couple of days. But that's my handicap, okay? I have to learn not to respond that way. So don't ever go to the place you say, well, that's just the way I am. You're just going to have to deal with it. No, that's just the way you are. You have to deal with it, okay? Now, they have to tolerate, be patient, and know that you're handicapped. They don't have to deal with it. Well, that's just too bad. It's the way I am. No. If you know that's the way you are and you're going to say that sentence, you already know that whatever you're doing is something you should not be doing, is out of balance. Otherwise, you wouldn't say it. You already know it's an inappropriate behavior and it's out of balance in some way. Then you're the one that needs to deal with it. You're not dealing with it, and you need to deal with it. So you know what you need to do? What have I taught you? Become an expert in your handicap. You got an anger problem? You tend to get loud? Well, learn how to not do that. You've got a judging problem, a critical problem, an overly sensitive problem, a boundaries problem, I don't know, whatever it is. Then learn about it, study it, find the books and the people out there doing seminars about how to deal with that problem. And some of it's going to be awesome and some of it's going to be garbage. And you're going to have to learn discernment to go through that to try to find the good stuff. But you got to own that it's your problem. You don't need to own my problem, or the person sitting next to you, or your wife, or your husband, or your kids. But you have to deal with it. You do have to deal with it. And you have to tolerate it. And you have to find ways to work with it. You know, I think the reason my relationship with my 2 children is the way it is because of the efforts I've made to adjust to them, not just forcing them to adjust to me. I've learned what pushes their buttons, and if I've done that, I know how to fix it. I know how to go and make that right because I've paid attention and I've learned and I accept that they have their wonderfulness. And my 2 kids are the most awesome kids, like any parent should think. They're the most awesome kids. But they also have their challenges. Why? Because some of their awesomeness has created weak areas. And if you think I'm great at what I do up here, then you got to know that weakens me somewhere else. It has to be. You have only so much points, okay? And if so much of those points are giving you this talent set, that means that you have a deficit somewhere else, okay? And so if you see someone who you say, wow, but you're all so together and you can play music or you can teach or you can do this stuff with, engineering or with plumbing or whatever it is that you do that's so amazing, cooking, I don't care what it is. That talent is offset by a weakness somewhere, okay? And so if you're dealing with someone, be aware that they're going to have weaknesses and don't judge them for it and get angry about it and frustrated about it because you don't want to have to deal with it. If you want the relationship, you do. If you had a child born to you that was handicapped, what are you going to not deal with it? Of course you're going to deal with it. And you're going to adjust to it. Or what if you had a child or a family member become handicapped? You're going to deal with it. You're going to adjust to it. My wife had to make an adjustment for those 3 or 4 weeks. I became handicapped in a very physical way. I could hardly move. I couldn't do anything for myself. Couldn't really breathe. Needed my food taken care of. I needed stuff brought to me and taken from me and just everything. I was handicapped. I was stuck in a chair. And she had to adjust to that. Well, what if you recognize that people have things that are much more long-term than 3 weeks in a chair? Okay, that person you're married to, all that stuff that irritates you, that's part of their handicap. Why not talk about it in a way where you can encourage them and help them with their handicap and they can help you with yours, instead of being so, PO'd about it. And you want to just have a big problem with it. Especially because our tolerance levels are almost zero because their handicap is not yours. In other words, you have strength in that area. You don't have a problem with yelling or screaming, or you don't have a problem with this or that or whatever it is. So you don't understand why they do. Of course not. It's not your problem. It's their problem. And they can't relate to yours because it's not their problem. And so we struggle. How are we going to have relationships unless we start understanding these things? So let me wrap it up with this. We got 2 verses done. We're going to read the whole chapter and chapter 6. Okay. Let me wrap it up with this. You have got to do 2 things. 2 things, otherwise none of this will work. All right? And I'm not discounting getting yourself in line with Yahweh and praying and all the other things. I'm talking just on the level of not the stuff you already know. Okay? You have got to do 2 things. One is you've got to own your stuff. In other words, recognize that you're handicapped. Stop being most of you are in denial. Okay? You want everybody to adjust to you instead of recognizing the challenge you have with other people is because you've got a handicap that's triggering things. All right? And so own that and work on it. Number 2, recognize that everybody else is in the same boat. You need to build high levels of the Ruach, which is patience, kindness, gentleness, long-suffering, all that stuff that makes you able to handle the challenges of dealing with a challenged person. And all of you are challenging on certain areas in certain ways. We're never going to get there if we don't do those 2 things. Okay? Own yours. Don't own theirs. Own yours. Adjust to theirs. Oh, well, what if they never change? Well, they're still yours. They're your friend. They're your sister, your brother, your mother, your wife, your husband, your kid. They're yours. Adjust to them. What if they never get there? Well, they're still yours, so adjust to them. If they had a physical handicap, you would adjust to them. You would, wouldn't you? I mean, were you frustrated with the baby who couldn't feed itself when the baby was a baby? All right, I fed you for 2 weeks, feed yourself already. When are you going to start changing your own diaper? You knew what they couldn't do. If you're married, you know what your spouse can't do. I know you don't like it, but you know what they can't do. If you have children, you know what they struggle to do. So adjust to it. Figure out other ways to get them to do what they're struggling to do, because the way you're going about it, you already know doesn't work because you've had that fun already for how many years? Okay? All right? Well, why not try a different way to get the results you're looking for when you already know the way you're doing it doesn't work? I mean, that's one of those signs of crazy, right? You're going to keep doing the same thing thinking you're going to get a different result. And I've talked to parents, and I said, why do you keep doing it that way? Well, I keep thinking it's going to work. Has it worked up to this point? No. So maybe you want to try something different. Same thing with husbands and wives. If you keep doing the same thing, you're going to end up in the same place. See, we have to decide we're actually going to change. How are you going to become Yeshua? Like, it has to be change. Excuse me. You can't transform without change. The word means change. Okay? So in order to make this work, we have to be open to and ready to actively change. Amen? Amen. All right, let's pray. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Great Creator, Father, we want to come to you in our weakness and asking you to help us to have an openness of mind and heart to see ourselves as we truly are. Not to be ashamed, not to beat ourselves up, not to feel bad, but to say, I get it now. I know what I need to work on. I can own my weaknesses. And if through the mercy and the compassion of Elohim, if I work on it, maybe a weakness can turn into a strength. So Father, we ask now that you would, in your mercy and patience with us, continue to encourage us and inspire us to do the things that will actually help us to genuinely want to change and transform into you, into what you are. Because Father, that is the hard part. We're still so proud of ourselves and our good stuff, and we ignore our bad stuff, and we don't want to change. I'm okay. I'm good the way I am. Nothing wrong with me. Well, we're still not Yeshua-like, so there's something wrong with all of us. And we all need to own that, work on it. And Father, we need you to continuously help it to stay in the frontlets of our minds and just in our thoughts so that we continuously look at each other as works in progress, other people who are just as damaged in their own ways as we are, struggling just as much as we are, wanting the same things we want, yet the irritation and the aggravation that we get, we forget that we do the same thing to others. Help us to truly see things in the right way so that we can develop the relationships correctly that we need to have. So, Father, we want to thank you. We want to ask all these things and appreciate you in the name above all names, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen.